This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Foreign aid pours into Lebanon after Tuesday's huge explosion that ripped through the capital, Beirut. Ghanaian Electoral Commission registers voters ahead of December poll. And authorities in South Africa to probe allegations of misuse of COVID-19 funds. Hello and a very warm welcome to you wherever you're joining us. This is Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, in business, South Africa's diamond polishers look closer to home to revive fortunes. And in sports, we tell you how the dominant athletics forces are coping with the postponed Olympics in our ongoing special series, 2020 Olympics Dreams Live On. We begin the hour in the Middle East, where at least 135 people have died and 5,000 have been injured in the massive explosion that rocked the Lebanese capital, Beirut, on Tuesday. Beirut port officials are under house arrest, and the city's food supply is only enough to last a month. The destruction of the port comes as the country is also struggling with the coronavirus pandemic. Yumna Naufal now reports.
Beirut, once titled the Paris of the Middle East, is now broken with over 300,000 people left homeless. Rescue workers are picking through rubble as tens of people remain missing. The governor of Beirut estimates the damage costs will exceed $3 billion. Some analysts describe it as one of the worst man-made explosions in history.
It looks like Japan and Hiroshima or Nagasaki. This is what this reminds me of. I've never seen this amount of destruction. I appeal to the Lebanese people to hold it together. We are strong and we will stay strong.
President Michel Aoun said the blast was caused by nearly 3,000 tons of ammonium nitrate being stored unsafely in a warehouse in the port area.
What happened today, the impact, the cost of the destruction, and let's bear in mind that the port is the major route of trade for Lebanon. This is the point through which we got our wheat, our gas oil, our medicine. This infrastructure is totally destroyed at the moment where we are in deep need of $1 single to come into Lebanon.
The country is already facing one of its cruelest summers, with more COVID cases registered in July than in the last 5 months combined. And is it suffering economic turmoil that is plunging the country into crisis? The explosion is the largest Beirut has ever seen, a city that has already witnessed 16 years of civil war and has endured periodic bombings and terror attacks for years. A city, many residents say, cannot seem to catch a break. Beirut is still reeling from the aftermath of the explosion as the numbers of casualties and injured keep rising, and public officials are scrambling to find answers for an angry and bewildered public. Yumna Naufal, CGTN, Beirut.
Well, witnesses have recalled the horrific moment when the explosion occurred. Some say they thought war had come again.
Well, it was a very scary moment, to be honest. As a Lebanese, I couldn't help but, in a moment like this where you hear that explosion sound, I thought maybe the war broke again. As a Lebanese, having lived the war twice already in my life, it was a very scary moment.
Some residents said it felt like an earthquake.
I was at home on the third floor. The house has a glass front and I was sitting right underneath. After the first explosion, the house shook and we thought it was an earthquake. But then, maybe 10 or 15 seconds after, we felt the second explosion. and the glass broke and flew while I ran away.
My wife and I were lying down there. My wife was there and I was on the other side. I heard a loud explosion and the noise of jet engines, so I went outside to see what had happened. While I was looking at the sky, something exploded and threw me back inside, and I saw my wife here covered in blood, hit on her head and on her ears.
A young couple was having their wedding photos taken. One moment, the bride was posing with flowers. The next moment, chaos.
While what happened during the explosion, here there's no word to explain what happened. I feel so sad. Trust me, what you see now, the smile and everything, it wasn't there totally yesterday. I was shocked. I was wondering what happened. Am I going to die?
Well, Beirut's Mayor Jamal Itani says the losses from the explosion could amount to billions of dollars, and he says it could take up to a year to rebuild the city. So how big was the blast and what exactly triggered the disaster? Yu Yang explains.
A massive explosion, followed by fireballs erupting in the air and a mushroom cloud. Authorities say it struck with the force of a 3.3 magnitude earthquake and was felt as far as 240 kilometers away on the island of Cyprus. Specialists at the University of Sheffield said the blast had 1/10 of the explosive power of the atom bomb dropped on Hiroshima 75 years ago. And they believe it's unquestionably one of the biggest non-nuclear explosions in the history, leaving a city in grief and shock.
Speechless, really. I can't say much except that we feel so sorry for the losses that we had.
The Lebanese government says about 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate stored at the port caused the disaster. They say these chemicals were seized from a ship and stored without any safety measures for 6 years.
Those responsible will pay the price for what happened. This is a promise to the martyrs and to the wounded. This is a national commitment. Facts will be revealed about this dangerous warehouse that has been there since 2014.
Ammonium nitrate is a fertilizer which is widely used by farmers, but which can be highly explosive. Whether used deliberately or blowing up by accident, it has resulted in many scenes of carnage around the world. In 1995, 2 tons of ammonium nitrate caused an explosion in Oklahoma City, leaving over 160 people dead. And 20 years later, around 800 tons of ammonium nitrate caused another tragedy in northern China's Tianjin port, killing 165. Countries around the world, including China, Germany and France, are deploying search and rescue personnel to Beirut, while Lebanese grapple with the questions over how such a huge and dangerous stockpile was left sitting there for so many years. Yu Yang, CGTN.
Well, international support is flooding into Beirut. A Turkish government plane carrying humanitarian aid, as well as doctors and search and rescue teams, headed there late Wednesday night. Supplies included personal protective equipment and medical kits. Russia also says it will deploy 150 personnel to Lebanon to build a field hospital to provide treatment for the injured. Germany is also heading to Beirut with search and rescue dogs, medical assessment teams and 15 tons of equipment and tools. The World Bank says it's ready to mobilize financing for Lebanon's recovery. Well, French President Emmanuel Macron has arrived in Beirut for an official visit following the warehouse explosion that killed over 100 people in the city. He has been received by Lebanon's President Michel Aoun. Macron is seeking to rally for urgent aid to Lebanon. He is also expected to press for overdue reforms in the nation, which is a former colony of France. While in the aftermath of Tuesday's explosion in Lebanon, support has come from an unusual source, Israel, where an image of Lebanon's flag was screened on Tel Aviv's City Hall. The gesture drew emotional responses from Israelis, with some saying it was inspiring, while others called it a betrayal. Stephanie Fried reports.
Displaying Lebanon's flag in central Tel Aviv is a historic moment for Israel. The obvious message is one of support for the Lebanese people.
I came from Jerusalem with my husband to see the flag here. Lebanon is a very beautiful place, and it's mean to us as an Arab, it's mean to us a lot.
Israel and Lebanon's history is riddled with conflict, war, invasion, and infiltration. The relationship between the two countries is characterized by tense anticipation of when the next major conflict will play out.
I will be very happy to help them humanitarily, but not to put on a flag. We are Israel, and Lebanon is an enemy.
In recent weeks, Israel reinforced troops along its border with Lebanon in anticipation of a possible strike. The Tel Aviv display is one of several gestures on the part of Israel aimed at helping Lebanon's citizens in the wake of the blast. Israel's defense and foreign ministries offered humanitarian and medical aid, and northern Israel hospitals signaled their willingness to absorb the overflow of injured Lebanese. Israeli officials say aid proposals to, quote, enemy countries aren't unusual. In 2017, Israel offered post-earthquake help to Iran and Iraq. And throughout Syria's nearly 10-year civil war, hospitals have treated wounded Syrians who are able to make it to the border. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, Tel Aviv.
To West Africa now, and ahead of Ghana's elections in December, the Electoral Commission has been registering voters. The 5-week-long exercise ends on Thursday. The Commission plans to conduct the elections despite the risks posed by COVID-19. The voter registration has, however, not been entirely smooth. Nabil Ahmed Rufai now reports.
The Electoral Commission began compiling a new voters register in June amid fears of the spread of COVID-19, despite a stiff resistance from the largest opposition party, the National Democratic Congress. The EC argued that the old register was not fit for purpose, hence it needed a new voters roll to conduct credible polls in December. But the opposition party disagreed. The EC has ensured that strict safety measures against the spread of the virus are adhered to at the registration centers. It has so far registered more than 15 million people on the new register. The voter registration exercise has, however, seen pockets of clashes at some centers in parts of the country between representatives of the ruling government and the opposition party. As the voter registration winds to a close, tension is building as the opposition party accuses the government of using the military to prevent its members from registering at its strongholds. The government has denied this and says the military were sent to the registration centers to maintain peace. Ghana has just 4 months to hold the crucial elections in December. As the political climate heats up, the country says it will go ahead to hold the elections despite the threat posed by COVID-19. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
To South Africa now, where the Special Investigations Unit will be looking into all contracts that are covered by the $30 billion stimulus package announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa in April. The package is meant to tackle the coronavirus pandemic. Ramaphosa gave the unit additional powers to investigate corruption in the pandemic period. He called corruption during a national disaster a particularly heinous crime and said that the perpetrators are going to be dealt with decisively and harshly. Angelo Coppola has more.
At the moment, the unit is investigating contracts worth $130 million in Gauteng alone. One allegedly features the spouse of the president's spokesperson and 2 senior officials in the Gauteng government. And then there's $70 million worth of contracts involving over 500 suppliers in the Eastern Cape that's being investigated.
Once you had this kind of mobilization of resources, it was almost inevitable, given the systems that we have in place, that these issues were going to come up. Having said that, I think we're encouraged by the statements made by President Ramaphosa acknowledging the problem.
The non-governmental organizations have been very vocal on corruption generally, and even more so around the pandemic.
Had we instituted the highest levels of transparency, it would have made accountability much more easier. And in this case, that certainly wasn't and hasn't been for a long while. Our view was that COVID-19 could have been used to transform at least this area of work.
The relatively quick response by Ramaphosa has been welcomed in many quarters, but will action be taken?
So I do think that the SIU investigation will yield results and will be positive. But in terms of the deep challenges around the culture of corruption and the systemic challenges, I don't think these issues are going to be resolved anytime soon unless we see much bolder action from the presidency in terms of tackling the issues within his own party.
I'm cautiously optimistic. I think we've seen an unprecedented statement from the ANC. I don't think we've ever had a statement indicating its own understanding of the magnitude of public anger, which I think their statement clearly indicates. And secondly, some kind of commitment with some timelines to taking action.
There's a fair amount of skepticism that nothing is going to happen this time round. That's despite pronouncements from the government that they plan to take action. The general public, however, want to see action. They want to see people go to court, found guilty, and go to jail for all the corruption and fraud that's taking place at the moment. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. Stay with us as we take a short break. Here's what's coming up. In our continuing series Made in Africa, we feature Morocco, a country basking in the glory of saffron production.
Miska ikhawaha darum ko nagkain itang ana nuko komenta ko ata isesa ismai kamangay kama
Welcome back. Now, Chinese youth are increasingly supporting vulnerable groups in Kenya. This is in line with China's 2020 Public Benefit International Challenge for Youth. The contest challenges youth in Africa and China to come up with innovative ideas to tackle pressing issues in Africa. Tunza Africa is among the organizations looking to connect young Chinese with volunteer opportunities in Africa. Kenya's Children's Garden Home and School is one of Tunza's Africa's beneficiaries. Children's Garden Home and School caters for orphans as well as abused and neglected street children. Wilkista Nyabwa has more.
His movements are smooth, economical, almost poetic. He moves like the wind. In a field of children playing and showcasing their talents, this teenager has no trouble standing out. With schools closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, he, like the other children here, has found time to hone his skills. This is Children's Garden School and Home in Kawangware, on the outskirts of Nairobi. 19 years ago, Moses Ndongo founded the center, which is both a school and a home for about 450 disadvantaged children from the neighboring settlements.
By then, 2001, schools were not free, and we had a lot of street children who were just rotting the streets. So that's when I came up and I thought I need to give back to the community, I need to support.
And as the home grew, so did the children's needs. Today, apart from the children's dorms, it has expanded to include a primary school and high school section to enable the children to get a good education.
I want these children to do well in the education. Because in Kenya, when you're educated, then you have good life. When you are not educated, then you go back to the streets.
But there aren't sufficient resources to meet all of the children's education needs.
In primary, as we don't have textbooks, we only use, you can find that we have only one textbook for the teacher. And that one textbook is the only one that we will use the whole class.
That's how Tunza Africa International Volunteers came in. Headquartered in Nairobi, Tunza Africa is an organization that connects Chinese youth and students who want to volunteer in African countries. Some have worked at Children's Garden Home, teaching music and song and martial arts and contributing to ongoing projects.
They come and taught us some activities, games, and also they teach us Chinese.
Whenever they come, I see a lot of life, because when I see them engaging, working together with our youth, with our children, it's really encouraging.
Tunza has also donated books to the Little School Library, which the home is looking to expand. And as soon as things return to normal, the organization will sponsor its very first student at the school to study plant operations in college.
Like doing plant operators, some other kids here in the home, they'll be somehow happy about it, and some of them will want to do it.
The center has grand plans for its pupils, but these are at a standstill until the COVID-19 pandemic ends. But they remain with the memory of the new friends they have made, a cultural exchange across 2 continents whose impact continues to be felt. Children's Garden Home acknowledges the importance of education in breaking the cycle of poverty, and through donations of books and other materials, volunteers and supporters are helping the children to work toward a better future. Wilkis Anyabo, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
Right now, to talk more about addressing children's issues, we have with us Muteru Njama live in Nairobi. Muteru is a child and youth expert, as well as the managing trustee of Change Trust, an organization that deals with adoptions and children's rights. Muteru, whether we like it or not, children are the most vulnerable group across the world. How did we get here, and how do we make the world a better place for children?
Thank you very much. Children have always been vulnerable. They are smaller, they are less developed mentally, and so adults in their growing and in issues have found themselves, children have found themselves less protected by adults. It's a duty for of the adults to protect children with whatever resources they have. States, for example, have financial and other kinds of resources. So over the years, from the First World War through the Second World War, and when the UN was formed, it was very clear that there needed to be a very specific mechanism and agreements around the world on, first of all, who is a child, and then the second one in what do we do to protect them. I think that one of the most controversial issues has been who is a child, and things like the age of the child and where does childhood begin and where does childhood end. But I wouldn't dwell on that, because at least we know there are many things that we agree on across the world. The first one is that children need protection, and so how do you protect these children? Children need protection, again, from violence, from abuse, and from exploitation. Those are the 3 things that we understand children to be protected from: violence, abuse, and exploitation. And there are different ways to do that. The first is strengthen the systems. Governments strengthen what we call national protection systems. That is the state mechanisms, budget, and putting structures like child protection places for children to go. And the second one, again, is supporting social change, where the government works with the families, with the people who are on the community, using social services and social protection to encourage people to protect children, so that children are not violated at home, children are not abused at home, in the streets, and things like that. At the national level, we are protecting children from things like war, things like ensuring that children are able to go on with life. And then on the third level is promoting child protection in emergencies. Once in a while, like you hear in Lebanon right now, there's an emergency. So how do we focus on children so that children are able to face the trauma, are able to be protected without abuse, and are able to find their parents and move on to the next level, go on with life after a tornado that's like it's happening in the US. What happens? So the state prepares itself before the actual event happens.
Right, Muteru, and let me just jump in there. And you did mention at the national level, as we heard earlier, countries like China have been instrumental in helping the vulnerable youths in Kenya. Just how important are these initiatives?
They are very important because they work within the community, and communities are able to have a response for a number of children. What usually is a struggle is facilities, especially that accommodate children, where children go to live and stay, because the world right now is moving from 2008, the world is really, really moving and seeing that children are better off in families. So there's a great reduction in the number of children's homes, but working with those same children's homes and people who came up anyway in the community to protect children so that they are able to support children in their families. For example, in this thing that we've seen, people are able to find families that they can interact with directly instead of coming and finding them in a group in a children's home. And that's the way things are going, especially for children's homes. So we are moving away and away from accommodation and going towards supporting families. And I'm sure, especially for China, which has a big influx of tourists coming to African countries, there are support mechanisms that allow the community to be stronger to support children within their families.
All right, Muteru, thank you very much for your insights there. Muteru Njama, who is a managing trustee with Change Trust, joining us live from Nairobi. Now, perhaps you're familiar with saffron. It is a spice used in foods, coloring, medicine, and perfumes. And it is the most expensive spice in the world. It can sell for up to $1,200 a kilogram or $15 for just a couple of grams. Presently, Morocco is the top producer of saffron in Africa. The country produces nearly 7 tons every year. Over 90% of the valuable spice is cultivated in the Taliouine region, which is at the heart of the industry.
الزعفران هو حاجة أساسية في المنطقة، هو المنتوج الوحيد اللي كتعتمد فيه الناس ديال المنطقة، هو الأساس ديالهم فاش كيعتمدوا عليه سنويا. سميتي محمد الأزرقي، من المواليد ديال 1989 في دوار إغري، جماعة سيدي حسين، دائرة ديال تاليوين، عملة تارودانس. أنا دخلت في الميدان في 2013 حيت الأصل ديال جدودي من كيديروا ديك الفلاحة ديال الزعفران، وبديت كنعاون الوالد في المنتوج ديالو، كيفاش كيتغرس، كيفاش كيحرثو، كيفاش كيتسقى. من ديك الساعة أنا خدام فيه، كنتعلمو شوية بشوية. ملي كيبداو الموسم ديال الزعفران تقريبا كنخدمو ما بين 15 حتى 30 واحد. الزعفران كنحرثو وكنزرعوه في شتنبر، وكيتسقى في الاول ديال اكتوبر. الجو اللي كيبغي الزعفران كيبغي الجو يكون بارد، الارتفاع، البلاصه اللي فيها الارتفاع كيكون فيها البرد اقل من 7 دوغري درجات، والماء كيبغيه تقريبا على الاقل مره في 20 يوم. كنجمعوا مره واحده في شهر اكتوبر، مره واحده في العام صافي. مرحبا بكم عندنا. مرحبا بكم. احنا بدينا كنقيو الزعفران كنقادو فيه، فاش جبناه في الجنان جمعنا كامل في الجنان، احنا جبناه للدار بدينا كنقيو. كيفاش كنقيو عاوتاني كيتنقى وحده بوحده كيما كيتجمع في الجنان، كيما كيتجمع في الجنان كيتنقى عاوتاني وحده بوحده بحال. والعيالات بزاف اللي كيخدموا هاد الخدمه هما اللي كيخدموها، وملي كنقيوه عاوتاني كنزيدو فيه النقه اللي الا فيه شي زبال ولا طاحت فيه شي طرف ديال شي وريضه ولا شي حاجه بيضاء كتحيل، كيتنقص ليه الجدر شويه، كنقصوا ليه الجدر باش ما يخسرش الكولور ديالو الا نشف. وملي كنساليو كيتنقى كيتقاد، كنديوه لو شوشوار. انا كنخدم لو شوشوار بزاف، هكا كنقادو في الشوشوار باش ينشف وباش تبقى لا كاليتي كيما هي. حيت كاين اللي كينشفو في الظل، كاين اللي كيديروا في الظل، ولكن الظل كيشد الوقت شويه بزاف، والمشكل كتكون فيه الغبره ولا دوز شي حشره ودوز فوق منه، حيت الزعفران حساس بزاف. ملي كنقادوه في الشوشوار تقريبا كنريقلو على الوقيته فاش بغينا.
السلام عليكم. أزول 30 هجر، لاج ولا السن 19 سنة. تعلمنا تقريبا ديك بين 9 سنين 10 سنين، كنا غير كنمشيو معاهم للجنان كنشوفو، ما كنحيدوش، غير كنشوفو كيفاش كيحيدو. مرة كنحيدوهم مرة لا كعرفتي لاش باقيين صغار. ولكن فاش كنجيو للدار كنجلسو، المهم تاني كنشوف فيهم. ولكن فاش تعلمناني تقريبا بين ديك 12 13 هكا.
دابا الزعفران نشف، خصنا نفيريفوه نعرفو كيف داير، ياك ما فيه شي حاجه ولا نقادو كامل ونشوفو الريحه ديالو هي هذيك. حتى اللون حتى هو بقى كيما هو في الاول. غندوقو اللوغو ديالو ياك ما تحرق ولا شي حاجه، هو هذاك صافي. دابا عندنا هذا هو الزعفران، راه دابا موجود للماكله. السلام عليكم. الفوائد ديال الزعفران كيصلح للبرد، كيصلح للتجميل بحال الوجه الشعر، كيصلح للبصر حتى هو للعينين. الحاجه الاخرى كاين اللي كيديروا على حسب الشرايين ديال القلب، اللي كيحل الشرايين ديال القلب الى مسدودين ولا شي حاجه، ولكن ما تكثرش منه. الا كثرتي منه راه كيجري الدم بزاف، حتى الانسان يقدر يمشي للغيبوبه.
Now, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, global diamond prices and demand were weak. But a number of the small players who polish the rough diamonds that South African miners unearth say they have been pleasantly surprised by the extent of lockdown jewelry buying. CGTN's Terry Wangari has more.
Firms have been pleasantly surprised on the recent increase of jewelry buying. One South African cutting and polishing firm says its custom-made jewelry sales have grown 60% since South Africa imposed a strict lockdown in March.
Never let a good disaster go to waste. I'm by no means suggesting that COVID-19 is a good disaster. What I'm basically saying is there has been opportunity in it, and we were fortunate to see the opportunity, to say, let's use social media, let's use different platforms to remain relevant. So to answer your question in short, simply, yes, it hasn't affected our business adversely, thank God. And we continue to grow even through this challenging period.
June was one of the best months in a year, according to Nungu, with sales including engagement and wedding rings. Customers used their weeks at home for online consultations and were lining up for their purchases when stores reopened in June. But some firms like De Beers were not so lucky.
Diamonds being a luxury product, and you know, in times of crisis, the first spending that people will cut back on is luxury diamonds. So all diamond manufacturing, mining entities have been impacted significantly as a result of COVID-19. And what does that mean? The absence of international travel, which is because in the diamond industry, it's face-to-face, it's a traditional industry where people still thrive on human interaction, one. Second is the lockdowns in the various key markets that have been in place since late February, the key markets being China, the US, India, Europe, Israel. So those lockdowns and the absence of international travel have led to a significant pause in trading activity in the diamond industry.
Jewelry prices have held steady. Profit margins, however, could improve as lower global demand has depressed the prices of uncut, unpolished rough stones bought from the mines.
We supply more than 500 carats, from half carat to 1.5 carat. 2 carat, probably 20% of that whole chunk. So what that means is that due to COVID, I mean, this year, I mean, we've only sold less than 20 carats. So you can imagine in terms of revenue how much we've done.
South Africa's diamond industry is now looking closer to home to revive its fortunes following the coronavirus slump.
Where I'm specifically passionate is in seeing South Africans and Africans consuming these diamonds. It's one thing to go all over the world and telling people what they know. They know our diamonds are amazing. It's another altogether to educate our local South Africans and Africans to say, begin to enjoy them and also learn their value, because they're a store of wealth.
South Africa's diamond industry is famed for supplying gems for the British Crown jewels. But with the recent rise in demand, it's hoped that this will appeal to the local market across Africa. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
And here's what's coming up on the sports on Africa Live. We tell you how the dominant athletics forces are coping with the postponed Olympics in our ongoing special series, 2020 Olympics, Dreams Live On.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome to the sport. Now, on our third installment of the postponed 2020 Olympics Games, we take a look at Africa qualifiers in athletics. CGTN's Richard Ntad now joins us for the third segment.
Indeed. Our special series 2020 Olympic Dream Lives On continues. Most of Africa's medals at the Olympic Games have been minted on the track and field and road in the speed, strength, and endurance sport of athletics. In our special coverage of the 2020 Olympics, The Dream Lives On, we step up the pace in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Egypt to find out how the most dominant nations in athletics are handling the postponement of the Tokyo 2020 Games to 2021. The first woman in Egypt to qualify for Tokyo 2020 Olympics contracted COVID-19 and recovered successfully. CGTN's Adel Al-Maroui now brings us the inspiring story of how her Olympic dream lives on.
Heidi Morsi gets ready for her training. She's Egypt's modern pentathlon champion. Heidi has brought Egypt's first Olympic ticket to Tokyo from the 2019 African Championship, but she is practicing as if she's never qualified.
I was the first Egyptian athlete to qualify, like not even in the modern pentathlon, but worldwide. I was the first ever athlete to qualify to Tokyo to make a good result in this World Cup, in this series, so I can qualify from the world rank. When I have a good rank between the other athletes, so it's a good sign for me, for my coaches, for the federation, that I can achieve our dream, which is to get an Olympic medal for the modern pentathlon.
It will make also other players fear you a bit, you know.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, yeah, something like this. Yes.
I met her at Cairo International Stadium, where she goes back to after a tough experience during the COVID-19 lockdown. Heidi caught the disease. Her life then came to a complete halt.
It wasn't easy at all because for the 4 months I was training alone. I can see, for example, the running coach once per week. But when I had the COVID-19, the virus, I stayed like 3 weeks without doing anything. I was staying alone because I cannot see anyone.
To cope with the restrictions imposed and the sudden pause to her athletic aspirations, it was a rough ride for the 19-year-old athlete. Heidi knew exactly what she needed to do, though.
I wasn't too much depressed because I knew that I have time. But it wasn't easy. So I remember that mentally I had to be in this period I had to be tough. I was working too much on my mental toughness with my mental coach because I said that okay, there's no time, there's no much time now, or there's no facilities to train my body, but this is the time to train my mind.
Mahmoud Abdulrahman has been her running coach since she reached the Youth Olympics in 2014. He closely monitors her speed and always tries to push her further. Mahmoud told me that somehow Heidi manages to get better after all the obstacles she has so far faced.
When Heidi is fixated on something, she gets it done. We have been through many setbacks during her career, like injuries for example, but she always comes out stronger than before. She has been a champion since she was 14 years old.
It's why she's been excited the Olympics got postponed. This energetic young woman understands that at her age, more training means better results. Already she has made history by being the youngest Egyptian to qualify to the Olympics back in 2016.
My dream 4 years ago was only to go there and explore different things, take the title like an Olympian now. But now, no, 4 years later, I have 1 year now till Tokyo. My dream is different. 4 years older now, so I have to think differently.
With such passion to the sport and focus on her progress, Heidi Morsi wants to make history in Tokyo next year and become the most successful Egyptian in modern pentathlon. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Ethiopia's athletics Olympic team for Tokyo 2020 was filled with a lot of new faces striving for greatness in distance running before the event was postponed due to the COVID-19. However, Hussein Shibo and his charges are not giving up despite the devastating news. CGTN's Gerum Chala brings us more.
She is world's famous track athlete with several gold medals under her name. The 25-year-old Sambari Tafari was engaged with her expansive daily training routine, hoping to represent her country in Tokyo Olympics this year with the marathon race. Then the bad news was heard at the last minute. Due to the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Olympic Games were postponed till 2021.
I was preparing myself well to participate in the marathon runs at the Olympics. My training for the Games was intense and done under huge commitment. We had started training despite the COVID-19 pandemic, but we were later told that the Tokyo Olympics had been postponed till 2021.
For Sembere and her fellow national team athletes, as well as the coaching staff, that was not a pleasant news.
The news of the postponement of the Olympics was very disappointing for all of us. We wished that that wasn't the case. My teammates and I were working hard, hoping for the games to be staged. You know, it's so hard for an athlete to know that there's no competition whatsoever due to this pandemic. What is an athlete with no tournaments?
All team members of the Ethiopian athletics team who were candidates of the Olympics, such as Sanbere and Solomon Barega, Tilahun, Andrew Amlak, as well as Mukhtar and Tadesse, were negatively impacted by the postponement of the Tokyo Olympics.
Sanbere and other athletes have, however, continued training, though there won't be any tournaments in any foreseeable future. And by practicing all precautionary measures to keep themselves away from the COVID-19, Sanbere and her friends have continued training. They say the spirit of sports is to never give up.
We have big hopes now. God willing, we shall rerun the games. We have been told to prepare for any upcoming tournaments. We were also advised to keep ourselves away from the virus and work individually. Therefore, we have continued our trainings with heart full of hope and optimism. I personally believe, God willing, athletics will soon return to its former venues.
Athletics is known as a traditional sports field for Ethiopians, middle and long distance runs being areas of specialization for many years. So the return of the games, both for athletes like Sambere and the entire athletics crazy fans of Ethiopia, is dearly awaited. Group Chala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The postponement of the Tokyo 2020 Games by a year came as a crushing blow to thousands of athletes across the world who had spent the last 4 years getting ready for the event. Besides the demanding physical and financial toll, a huge number of face mental challenges as they strive to keep fit for 2021. In our special segment, we take a look at sports mental wellness.
Did you know sports is 10% physical and 90% mental? Every sportsperson needs to apply some degree of physical strength in their game, from athletes to swimmers, cyclists to basketball players, etc. All have to put in the extra hard work. But the most underlying factor is mental wellness. So what happens when a global pandemic affects one of the most prestigious sporting events, the Olympics? Following the postponement of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, sportsmen and women across the globe were affected in one way or the other. We highlight some of their reactions to the breaking news. So, bearing the weight of such news, how did they get back on their feet? And did the news affect their training and their focus? I spoke to a sports therapist to get clarity on this matter. Thank you so much, Sean, for your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
To what extent do you feel Olympians have been affected mentally by the postponement of the Olympics?
So what we found in our athletes, and completely understandably so, is we found a significant emotional impact and emotional roller coaster that they've gone through since the news has come out and since the news has broke. And understandably so. I think most of these athletes work 4 years and longer to reach their dreams and reach this goal of going to the Olympics, and it's in this time has been taken away from them. And if you look at Kubler-Ross's model from a psychological perspective, athletes generally go through a modified version of shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and eventually acceptance. And it's my job during this time and my role to get them to that stage of acceptance. However, that doesn't take the emotional impact away. So understandably so, it's been a difficult time and a bit of a roller coaster, but a significant negative emotional impact on them.
Now, with all the uncertainty, do you feel Olympians can still be anxious about the games in 2021, given that no vaccine, no cure has been found for COVID-19?
I think it goes without saying that any athlete is going to experience some form of anxiety during this time. If you compare it to, the Rio 2016 with the Zika virus, a lot of the athletes went through the same thing. It was that fear and that anxiousness of contracting the disease. At that time it was through mosquitoes, etc. But you can understandably the anxiety will be present. A large part of their focus for the time being is going to be to refocus on their goals and make the decision of whether they want to go to the Olympics or not. But it's not a case of whether there will be anxiety or if there will be anxiety. It's when anxiety comes and the impact that it's going to have on them.
What kind of support do you feel should be accorded to athletes during this tough time?
As an Olympic committee, I truly believe we need to employ professionals to go reach out and chat to these athletes during this time. So from my perspective, get them the support that they need during this time. Start with a psychologist or professional, get a support group, and then eventually get in touch with the coaches. And that's going to be from a professional Olympic committee perspective. I think all the Olympic committees around the world and countries need to put that in place.
All right, thank you so much, Sean, for your time and expertise. Would have loved to talk long, but this is it for now. We appreciate it.
Having served notice by winning a bronze medal at the Doha 2019 World Athletics Championship, Kenya's Amos Kipruto has landed a dream slot in the Tokyo 2020 Kenya men's marathon team. Touted as the next big thing in the marathon, he is hoping the postponement of the games has not robbed him of his chance of medaling at the greatest sporting carnival in the world. Our correspondent, Shadiq Shaban, brings us more.
This is how the day begins for this group of 4 Kenyan athletes. Each of them is now donning a face mask as part of new training regulations. The team has remained unchanged for over 7 weeks now since they began training.
Now we are prepared for 2-day long runs. We are going to do 35 kilometers. And I think everybody is here capable to do it. And we are ready now.
Go. 3 athletes, Barcelis Kipyego, Solomon Diego and Jairus Kipchoge, have not qualified for the Olympic Games but are pacing Amos Kipruto, who has secured a slot in the Games. Ordinarily, this group would have had at least a dozen athletes in training.
In my side, I miss my training mate because I really enjoy the company of my training mate.
Training for the Olympic Games in the era of coronavirus pandemic has forced Amos Kipruto to totally overhaul his personal schedule. Amos Kipruto represented Kenya internationally for the first time in 2019 and won the bronze medal in the men's marathon at the World Athletics Championships in Doha. He'd planned to follow it up quickly with another medal at the Olympic Games in 2020.
Olympic have been postponed to, from now is 1 year exactly. So you see now you are aiming to finish the program and come to rest, but now you start now to adjust your mind to say, oh, still have 1 year to train. So now we see it's a long journey, but we accept as an athlete because our health is important. So because we know in future we have many races to race.
This is the new normal for the elite Kenyan athlete. With reduced movements and interactions due to coronavirus pandemic, Amos Kipruto is now running another race of his life.
So this is the second part of my program where I practice to know about the dairy farming, to learn for the future. Not after my career, I will start practicing a huge dairy farming. So I see that is a good income in me.
If everything had gone according to plans, then Amos Kipruto would have been in Japan at this particular point in time, preparing to compete in the marathon at the Olympic Games. But the reigning world bronze medalist is not in Japan and is not competing. is holed up here in Kenya and has turned into a small-scale farmer whilst preparing and waiting to compete at the rescheduled Olympic Games in 2021. Sadiq Shaban, CGTN, in Kapsabet, Kenya.
Ball games have been a staple of the modern Olympic Games since their inception in 1896. Join us tomorrow in our special series, The 2020 Olympic Dream Lives On, and find out how African countries are gearing up for Tokyo 2021. Back to you in studio.
All right, thank you too, Richard. That's all we have for you on this edition of Africa Live. Do remember that you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen now and give us a follow on our digital media platforms. I'm Mahia Mutua from myself and everyone here. Thanks for watching.